Good evening. The time having arrived and a quorum being present, I hereby call this meeting of the Brockton Finance Committee to order. Madam Clerk, item number 1.
That would be, Mr. Clerk, we'll run this like a council meeting.
There you go, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 1, appointment of Matthew Stanton of Brockton, Mass. to the Beautification Committee as a member for a one-year term ending April 2024. Invited Matthew Stanton.
Join us, Mr. Stanton. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you? Nice to see you back.
Nice
I'm glad
to see
you're
you.
doing well. Evening,
Have
everyone.
you got a statement for us or anything?
I was just honored when you reached out to me about the committee. It's very important. There's this Saturday, May 6th. From registration starts at 7:30 till 9. Keep Brockton beautiful day. So I would expect all of you and all your vast networks of people to be up there grabbing pictures. I don't know who is the delegation going for the coronation. I don't know if it was Ward 1 but hopefully everybody can make it, and it's a great thing.
Thank you.
Motion to
Recommend favorably.
Sorry.
Second. All right, a motion has been made and properly seconded.
That's all right.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to
Thank
seeing
you,
you
Mrs. Stanton.
Saturday.
Item number 2, ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council authorize the acceptance of the grant award in the amount of $16,470 from the Mass Housing Partnership's Mass General Laws 40A 3A MBTA Communities Technical Assistance Program. Mass Housing Partnership shall hire and pay the consultant directly. No funds will be passed through the City of Brockton. Invited Rob May, Director of Planning and Economic Development, and Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer. And councilors, just to let you know, the items number 2 and 4, the backup that came out of our office due to a little communication error between the planning and ourselves is flip-flopped, so, but the order is correct.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Madam President. Or, well, actually, you're chair now.
Yes, that too. You tell us about this.
We have item 2 is a grant from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership to provide some technical assistance for the Montello neighborhood to basically establish a baseline for compliance with the new MBTA 3A zoning requirements. And so every community in Massachusetts that has MBTA service is responsible for making sure that their zoning amendments allow a certain number of a certain number of units being produced throughout the city, but mostly within a half mile of the 3 train stations. And this analysis will establish the floor as to where we are in the Montello neighborhood and help us determine if we need to come back to City Council with recommendations on how we might improve zoning in that district to be compliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilors? Councilor Azak.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. May. And, you know, our ears perked when you said Montello. So this is Councilor Lally's and myself in Ward 7, so Ward 6 and 7 area. So how, it's not a lot of money?
It's a down payment.
Okay. So it's a down payment, and so this will be done through your office, or are they sending?
Yes, they'll work through our office, and basically this part is basic analysis, and we'll come back to City Council with the results of that analysis, get some feedback from you all, and then apply for additional funding so that we can continue the development process of potential zoning requirements to be in compliance with the Massachusetts state law.
Okay, very good, exciting. So I know we've been talking about this for a while. Approximately how much, what is our timeline? Are we looking, is it this year? I know that the money has to be used this year for the grant, but are we moving a little quicker?
This work should be done by June.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Thank you very much. Thank you,
you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Mr. May.
Good evening, sir.
So obviously, the MBTA is looking for municipalities with these commuter rail stations have a higher density of residential development within a certain distance around that station. Now, I know the state offers 40R, financing to help develop these multi-unit residential developments. With this new kind of mandate on the city, can we expect any additional help financing these projects from the state?
That is a good question. I know that the governor's budget had put some additional funds into the Housing Development Incentive Program, HDIP, the 40V, and hopefully the House voted out its budget already, and we'll
I don't
have
believe
to-
it made their final
didn't
vote.
make the House budget,
Right.
and hopefully we'll be able to
it back in
include
the Senate.
that in the conference committee when it passes the Senate, which we're much more confident in. You may have seen an article in the Globe not too long ago. The affordable housing advocates out of Boston are very pro-housing, but they're pro their housing. And as we've tried to explain, we need a balance of housing in communities. It doesn't make sense to concentrate affordable housing in one location. And so that's why HDIP 40V is important to be able to balance the population.
No, completely agreed. I think, and we can talk about HDIP maybe at another time, but I think there's some eligibility issues there that maybe they can tighten up in the Senate to be able to provide more of that money to communities, gateway cities that really need it, instead of other communities that their market rates can support the developments that they're trying to build. But again, that's for another day. Are there any commercial components to this new mandate, or is it straight residential?
It is straight residential under the current guidelines, and we hope to amend those guidelines to allow for mixed-use development and not just residential. But there are things that we can do to not demand mixed use, but to encourage mixed use. And certainly being close to the train stations and improving the walkability of these areas is going to increase the need for commercial uses on the first floor.
Right, agreed. I hope with Resolve that we're going to hear later tonight maybe touch upon some of these issues. So I appreciate your work on this matter, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. May,
Yes, sir.
Council Farwell and I have been kind of doing some background work on this particular issue because we were under the impression that there was a certain deadline that the city had to meet in order to be in compliance with this new mandate. Can you talk a little bit more about that, or?
We are in compliance with the mandates timelines. Any zoning that would need to be amended would have to be done by, I think it is 2024. I'll have to look for the exact date, but there were two different thresholds or deadlines that we have passed and have complied with, and the third deadline is coming up in 24, and that's to amend any zoning.
Because I'm under the impression that this mandate, as far as the city of Brockton is concerned, some of the other smaller communities in Massachusetts might have a tough time to be in compliance with this particular mandate. But the way the city is composed, the way the composition of the buildings around these stations, in the sense, I think, to be honest with you, at least from what we were told, it's just that redrawing the lines in the sense and stay within that compliance process. Why is it that it's taking consultants again and studies to be done and all these other things, if it could be done at a minimum just to kind of get it done and get it through, since it's not going to affect, from what I was told, it's not going to, it has probably zero effect in what we have in those areas anyways. It's not going to affect housing, it's not going to affect any of that stuff. It's just redrawing those boundaries around those stations to basically stay in compliance. Why not just?
It's much more than redrawing the boundaries around those, around the station areas. We currently don't have a zoning district that has a 40 unit per acre minimum density. And one of the things that we're trying to do, and especially in, say, the Campello neighborhood or the downtown in Trout Brook area, where we're trying to work with the community to develop the right mix of incentives in design guidelines and development standards that is going to drive the kind of development that the community wants around their train stations. So it's much more complicated than just drawing a line.
Well, that's not the understanding that I have. And there's actually a gentleman in the community that we've met with a couple times that actually has been working on this for quite some time. And he is of the understanding, I think he's done a great deal of background work on this, that it's not nuclear science or, we don't have to redesign the new space shuttle with this particular thing. So I think one of the mistakes that we continue to make in this city is that we try to make a mount out of a molehill every time something comes down the pipeline, with consultants, sending it out for studies and continue to drag it around instead of just kind of facing it, head on and dealing with it.
I know who you're speaking of, and I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but it's not as simple as he would have you believe.
Well, I hope so, but I'm just saying that at least his doing wasn't going to cost the city any money, and hopefully this will be done through grants and things like that. That will not cost the taxpayers any money.
That is certainly the plan.
And I look forward to, getting this stuff done and off the board here, because it seems like we drag these things a little longer than need to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Director. Good evening, Mr. Director. Just quickly to sort of pick up where Councilor Thompson was inquiring, a lot of the area east of the train station in Montello is commercial industrial.
Yes.
Now, talking about, changing that or how we'd rezone it, that is one thing, but a lot of it was, used by, the shoe companies back in the day where you could, sort of get rid of chemicals easier that you shouldn't be able to get rid of. So they put some stuff in the ground in some places where you can't really build houses. Is the state going to, or would the state be open to considering any kind of assistance with that? Because it's going to be a tough sell to get some of those, empty lots constructed.
Well, the state has the state and the federal government have a very robust brownfield redevelopment program. The state's is through the mass development. They also have a transfer of liability program through the Attorney General's office. There's all sorts of remedies to be able to deal with environmental contamination.
All right, well, that was my big question for their vision for the area. I wanted to make sure they could back it up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Farwell.
Just to close this out, what marching orders will we give Mass Housing Partnership? In other words, specifically, what would you like to see the city obtain from their efforts as they proceed with this grant?
Well, with this particular grant, what they are doing is they've hired an economic consulting firm who is doing, or will be doing, an analysis of the existing zoning, which is, as Councilor Lally had mentioned, includes C2, includes a very limited amount of R1C, R1C, and industrial zoning. So what they're going to do first is to analyze, does the existing zoning comply with what is required under Mass General Law 40A, or 40A Section 3A. We're doing that also in Campello and Montello, so that we'll have an exact idea of where we are across the spectrum, and then we'll be able to come to the community, to council, to say, we'll have a model that if you adjust here and adjust here, we can meet the requirements, or if you adjust this, we'll be able to see exactly what we're going to be able to get out of the process.
Okay, and last question, at this point, do you foresee a situation where we might have to take property currently zoned commercial or industrial and change it to residential to comply with the MBTA, so-called MBTA requirements? And the reason I ask that is that the Board of Assessors, particularly the chairman, cautioned us that we're having an erosion of our commercial property base, and that is shifting the tax burden onto homeowners. And if that erosion continues, my concern is that we'll skew the burden of paying taxes too much to the homeowners, and that's why I would prefer not to lose commercial or industrial property.
Exactly, and that is a decision the city council is going to have to make, because you are the ones that approve and ratify zoning. So what we're doing, and this bleeds into item 4, so I don't want to go too far, but we are having a series of community meetings for the residents to better understand and comment on the kind of zoning that they would like to see. And we'll do this eventually in Montello when additional state fundings come available. But that is something that we're doing at Campello at the moment. But I want to keep it on Montello, pardon me.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilors, I entertain a motion.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full
Second.
city council.
Okay, a motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thank you.
Oh, and councilors, I just want to make you aware, I've heard from Ward 2 Councilor Maria Tavares, and unfortunately, she's unable to join us tonight. Mr. Clerk.
Item number 3, ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council authorize the acceptance of the grant award in the amount of $125,000 from the Mass Broadband Institute's Technical Assistance Program. Mass Broadband Institute shall hire and pay the consultant directly. No funds will be passed through the City of Brockton. Invited Rob May, Director of Planning and Economic Development, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Mr. May.
Good evening. This grant opportunity has come to us from the Mass Broadband Institute, which is a program of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They have made available to us technical assistance in the amount of $125,000. They would hire a consultant to work with us to prepare what's called a digital equity plan. And digital equity is about broadband access. And in this case, digital equity is not just, is there a fiber in your front yard? Is there coax cable that you can tap into? But can you afford it? Do you have the devices to be able to use the internet that is in front of your house, whether that's smartphones, iPads, computers? And then lastly, do you have the skills to be able to understand and to actually use broadband access? This is a huge initiative of the Biden administration. They're making funds available. These funds are passed through from the state, but it is going to set us up eventually to be able to draw down some additional funding from the Commonwealth and from the federal government to implement a digital equity plan. Right now, we have a digital equity task force, which includes several residents of the community, some small businesses, and is representative, you're represented by Councilor Tom Minicello on the committee. So we had a meeting with the consultant. We are waiting for the council approval before we actually start work on this, but it's a very exciting time to be able to bring Brockton residents multiple languages, multiple cultures into the internet age. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have a question.
Yes,
On the
ma'am.
second page of the air table form, it talks about a digital access plan on which will go a digital equity plan. Are we going to see the access plan?
Yes, we are. We are. And I'm sorry, I was hoping that this digital equity plan is a chance for us to get more information, to interview more people, to add to this plan, and of course, interviewing counselors, so that we can present both of these as a product for development.
Okay, okay.
It's one thing to talk about, can we afford to put fiber in the street? It's another thing as to who's going to use it, and do they have the,
Sure, and how, sure.
it's making sure that we're ready.
Motion to
Councilors, I'd
recommend
entertain-
favorably back to the full
Second.
city council.
Okay, thank you. A motion's been made and properly seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Item number 4, ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council authorize the acceptance of the grant award in the amount of $150,000 from the Mass Housing Partnership's Technical Assistance Program. Mass Housing Partnership shall hire and pay the consultant directly. No funds will be passed through the City of Brockton. Invited, Rob May, Director of Planning and Economic Development, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Mr. May.
Good evening, Counselor. This grant opportunity is an opportunity to really look at the development around the Campello neighborhood, and especially the station area and what was the historic downtown of Campello. It encompasses parts of wards 3 and 4, mostly in 4. But it's an opportunity that we can then bring the residents of the neighborhood together, bring the businesses together to discuss what we envision the future of the Campello neighborhood is. It's very similar to some of the work that we did downtown, and it builds upon the 2 previous studies, which created a vision for the Campello area. This is going to take that vision and try to turn it into an urban renewal plan, make some zoning recommendations, and potentially look at creating a district improvement financing plan for the area to help implement projects that are developed through the urban renewal process.
Councilor D'Agostino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here and your work on this.
Evening,
I want to thank you and your staff, as well as Mouse Housing Partnership. Last Wednesday night, we had a very successful community meeting where we had members of the community come to give their input. As you mentioned, was part of the process. There's 3 more of those that'll come up. But I do want to thank all of the residents and businesses who came out as well and joined us and gave us their input. I thought we got a lot of great feedback. So it was a great evening, and again, we had good participation. So I do want to ask, and you know, I hate to ruin the celebration a little bit, but one of the questions that I was asked last Wednesday, apparently, and this predated my time certainly on this council, and I don't know if it predates you, this was done once before, apparently 10, 12 years ago, and it didn't really go anywhere. And so the question I got was, how's this going to be any different? Like, this is great, we'd love to see redevelopment, we'd love to see this happen, but we did this once and it didn't go anywhere. Why will this be different? Can you help me with that?
Yeah, we have been at this for a while, and I agree with that. You know, we've made some additional staffing changes in our office. We have more capacity now through some new hires. But it's a partnership now with Mass Housing Partnership, with the Brockton Redevelopment Authority, and the city that is going to make the difference here by creating an urban renewal district out of this plan, by having the funding to make recommendations for future zoning based on what feedback we get from the public. I think we're going to have a much more implementable plan rather than just a vision. It will actually have stepping stones. And if you look at that vision plan, it says we should do X, Y, and Z, and that's those are the things that are in this plan, the urban renewal, the DIF, and potential zoning recommendations.
So did it never, all right, so it never got to the level of an urban renewal plan in the past?
Correct. It gets close, but this now will put it over the end zone.
Okay, good. That's helpful so that I can, for those that say, hey, we've done this before, I can kind of give them a reason to basically believe that this time we are going to be able to do something, and
This is incorporated into that, and it becomes something bigger in of
Right.
itself.
good, good. Well, again, I do want to thank all of the effort from, again, Mass Housing and your office that went into this so far. And this goes back several months of the steering committee that Councilor Nicastro and I are both working on, and as well as several others. So, again, it was good to have
Thank you.
all the input we had last Wednesday, and
Great meeting.
appreciated you guys putting that together and being there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll just say that I support this wholeheartedly. I want to see this happen. Unfortunately, health issues have kept me from going to the last several meetings. I plan to attend the rest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
A motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor? Those opposed? Thank you. The motion
Thank you, ma'am.
passes. Thank you, Mr. May.
Item number 5, ordered that the City Council reauthorize the vacant and abandoned buildings revolving fund for the purpose of maintaining the abandoned buildings registry, as well as the closing, boarding up, and care of vacant and abandoned buildings. The vacant and abandoned buildings revolving fund shall receive the receipts of payments and fines for fees for the registration of vacant and abandoned buildings. Expenditures from the vacant and abandoned buildings revolving fund shall be made on the authority and direction of the building superintendent, provided that no more than $250,000 may be so expended without further appropriation from the vacant and abandoned buildings revolving fund during the fiscal year +24. The building superintendent shall comply with the reporting requirements of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half. Invited James Plouffe, Commissioner of Buildings, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. As you can see, your Commissioner of Buildings is behind me and is prepared to discuss 2 of the 4 revolving funds that are before you. I thought I would just give you a quick introduction. This vacant and abandoned building fund was created by the City Council in 2012. The clerk described its general purpose. Jim can speak more readily to how the fund is used, but I did want to let you know right now, the balance in that fund is $1,012,830. And for this fund in particular, actually a couple of these, as part of your annual budget, we ask you to use some of these funds to support the operations. And as you know, Jim Plouffe and the mayor and the law department have been working with you on changing some of our code enforcement procedures and creating some positions. One of the proposals we will make to you during the budget process next month is that we use some of these funds for some of those positions that are specifically dedicated to the purposes outlined in the enabling legislation. So with that, I'm happy to yield to Jim, but I'll have a similar introduction for each of the 4 revolving funds that are before you tonight for the annual approval.
Good evening.
Councilors, thank you very much for having us tonight. First thing I'd like to do is introduce Jeff Martin, one of my building inspectors. He is actually the building inspector for the vacant and abandoned building program. So his dedicated work in our office is for vacant and abandoned buildings. Over the past number of years, I know I've talked to many of you individually regarding the constituent complaints about living in a house and getting charged for things that are not supposed to be charged for. What Jeff has done in the past 4 to 5 months is he's driven by every single one of the properties that was on our registry and confirmed whether or not it was vacant or not. And what he's done is whittled down the list to about, right now, just over 107 properties. His next task will be to go out and try to find more vacant properties, because we know there are more than 107 in the city right now. But that's what Jeff does, and I also have an administrative assistant that's dedicated in our office for the vacant abandoned fund, who works with Jeff day in and day out. Just to give you an idea, our expenditures for the past year have just reached 127,000. Sorry, I'm getting to that age where I have to put glasses on now. $127,986.47, and that's this fiscal year. And that goes towards some code enforcement software that we have for the salaries of both our building inspector and our administrative assistant, and for any operations that we have in the building, vacant buildings, such as board ups or tear downs. In the past fiscal year, we've taken down 8 buildings from an order that we came to the city council from in the last fiscal year to take down 4 city-owned buildings and 4 private buildings were unsafe. All of them were vacant. This fiscal year, we have not taken any down with these funds yet, but we have them in reserve in case there's an emergency and we have to use it. With that, I would ask for any questions of myself or my inspector.
All right, Councilor Farwell?
Just very quickly, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, this program has been in effect for quite a few years. This has a very important public safety component because taking down vacant and abandoned buildings, which could be a fire hazard, could be occupied by persons that aren't authorized. We need to do this every year, and I won't make a motion yet, but I will move favorably when everyone has spoken.
Anyone else?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion has been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6, ordered that the City Council reauthorize the roadway design and construction revolving fund for the fiscal year 2024 for the sole purposes of funding the creation and maintenance of the roadway design and construction revolving fund. The fund shall receive the receipt of payments of fines and fees for the engineering, design, construction, and paving of projects. Expenditures from the roadway design and construction revolving fund shall be made on the authority and direction of the Brockton Department of Public Works Commissioner, provided that no more than $1 million may be so expended from the roadway design and construction revolving fund during the fiscal year 2024. The Brockton Department of Public Works Commissioner shall comply with the reporting requirements of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E and 1/2. Invited, Patrick Hill, Commissioner of DPW, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening again, Madam Chairman. This time I have with me DPW Commissioner Pat Hill, who is prepared to speak to the roadway design and construction revolving fund. This was created by the council just last year, and the objective in creating this fund was to capture some of the funds when entities other than the city of Brockton do paving, utility companies, for instance. This fund was created that rather than them conducting paving, putting that money into a revolving fund where we could then take it out and use it when we're doing larger projects. There is currently no money in the fund, so we haven't yet made any deposits or expenditures from that fund, but Pat does anticipate a fairly substantial deposit in the fund in the very near future. So, Madam Chairman, I'll yield to him to let him explain that to you.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Councilors, so this fund was established so that we wouldn't be duplicating efforts on large projects. So, right now, a perfect example would be Carroll Ave. Carroll Ave was a project that we had planned on moving forward with a complete reconstruction of the road. The gas company had gone in there. We were getting ready to accept payment for that, and we ended up shifting the money to another job. We were told when Eversource bought out Eversource bought out Bay State Gas, or Columbia Gas, that they would no longer honor that agreement, allowing us to shift money from one job to another, so we weren't duplicating efforts on other jobs. So right now, the 2 streets that we're accepting the $60,000 for are streets that we're in progress of paving. So we think that the fund will have a substantial amount of money over the next couple of years. North Main Street being one of the projects, or Warren Ave two-way traffic project being another. But it's just a way for us to capture money so that we're not duplicating efforts in paving.
Motion to recommend favorably?
Second.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Council.
Item number 7, ordered that the City Council reauthorize the demolition revolving fund for the fiscal year 2024 for the sole purpose of helping to fund costs in connection with demolition of buildings in the City of Brockton. The demolition revolving fund shall receive the receipt of payments of all demolition charges of the City of Brockton. Expenditures from the demolition revolving fund shall be made at the direction of the building superintendent with the written approval of the mayor, provided that not more than $110,000 may be so expended from the demolition revolving fund during fiscal year 2024. The building superintendent shall comply with the reporting requirements of Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half. Invited James Plouffe, Commissioner of Buildings, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening again, Madam Chair. This revolving fund is a cousin to, but different from, the vacant and abandoned buildings fund. And Jim will explain to you in a minute that it's actually been used a fair amount in the last year. The current balance in this fund is $162,675. It too was created in 2012 by the City Council, so this is the annual renewal.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. This fund is a fallback fund for our demolition work for vacant buildings or other types of buildings that maybe were damaged, the owners can't afford to remove, etc. We haven't actually tapped this money in the past year. This is the same amount that I believe was in the account last year. We've used our demolition funds that are in our budgetary line item first that we've been given. This is like I said, a fallback. The demolition funds go fast, especially with asbestos and other materials inside of these dangerous buildings. So when we have to take down a building, it pretty much wipes out our account. Sometimes I have to tap into other line items to cover that. This account allows us to be able to cover the gap if there's any additional properties any additional cost to a demolition property. The way we recapture the money is any properties that we take down that are owned by somebody else, we lien a municipal lien on that property. And when that municipal lien is paid off, it goes back into the account to be used again.
Thank you.
I'm free for any questions, Madam Chair.
Motion to
Councilors?
recommend favorably?
Second.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 8, ordered that the City Council reauthorize the Comcast revolving fund for fiscal year 2024 from all cash receipts from Comcast franchise fees in excess of $675,000 pursuant to the cable license contract, and that further that the expenditure from this fund shall not exceed $750,000 without further appropriation during fiscal year 2024. Invited Joseph Miranda, Brockton Community Access President, Scott Mercer, Brockton Community Access Executive Director, and Troy Clarkson, the Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, gentlemen. Has Mr. Miranda joined us?
No, I don't see him.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening again. So this is the last of the 4 annual renewals of the revolving funds. This one behaves a little differently than the others in that there's a larger amount that's at the discretion of the mayor. But as you know, with the contract with Comcast, the first $675,000 of that revenue goes directly to BCA to fund their operations. Then the remainder of those funds from Comcast, whatever they may be, based on their number of subscribers, goes into this fund. We're carrying a substantial balance in the fund now, but I'll explain to you why for a couple of different reasons. So there's $2,852,913 currently in the fund. We have been discussing for some time with BCA funding some of their capital improvements, and the mayor, as you just heard, has a discretionary spending level of up to $750,000 a year and has been working collaboratively with the school department to help fund some improvements on audio and visual equipment in their auditorium. So some of this money is being kept, over $1 million in reserve for that. But there is still a substantial balance. We do use it for other cable and video-related expenses in the city, including some cameras. So happy to discuss any questions you have, but I'll also turn it over to Scott.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm learning of this myself. I'm here just a year, as you all know. And so we're continuing to work with the 675, and I would love to get more. And the reason for that is to increase the production staff. Over the last year, we've spent pretty much over 50 to 60% of our budget on staffing, and then the rest is left for operational. And in that context, it's been difficult, but we're making progress. So it's good to hear that there's a reserve that's available as well. So I don't know how to negotiate that and get to that, but what I would like to ask for, which would be beneficial to me as the executive director, as well as the board, is to get the gross avenue revenue statements from Comcast so that we could see what that 75% is, so that we can plan accordingly moving forward. I know there are 116,000 estimated subscribers for Comcast. I'd like to confirm that as well. So those are the budgetary variables that I'm trying to solidify so that I can prepare a more appropriate budget. Would like to expand with the podcasting because that's a very high demand by our membership, which is the Brockton citizens, and I'd like to do the same as it relates to field camera equipment and coverage for the city of Brockton. So, any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Councilor Azaf.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mercer.
Good evening.
Nice to see you here, and
Always
I
a
know we're
pleasure.
coming up on, have we hit a year yet? No. Have you-
Just in March for me, yes. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm not sure if this question's for you or for Mr. Clarkson, but is our contract up for negotiation? Is the mayor in negotiations now, or when, for Comcast? Did it already happen? Did we miss it?
No, I believe,
Every
Counselor,
5 years, right?
every 10 years.
Oh, it's every 10.
And it was recently renegotiated, so we're at the, I believe, I can verify that for you, but I believe we're in the early years of the latest renewal. Was
Okay.
that perhaps renewed when Councilor Rodriguez was mayor? Do I remember that correctly? 4 years ago. 4 years ago,
Oh,
okay.
renewed 4 years ago? So it's every 10 years. I thought it was every 5, okay. So I was just, it's kind of interesting because earlier we talked about broadband and everything coming in to the city, so I'm wondering where we will be with Comcast and, yeah.
I think that's a very legitimate question that many communities are grappling with, trying to predict how the cable TV industry will be changed by broadband, how it's already being changed by people choosing just internet-based television. So we haven't seen a substantial decrease in the money we receive from Comcast. And you know what, when Scott had asked for that a few days ago, I want to provide that to him, but when we do, we'll provide it to you as well, just to give you some texture on what the history's been the last few years in that revenue.
Okay, I would really appreciate that. I'm a Comcast customer, have been for over 20 years, and I just feel like they're not really nice to their actual customers. They're only interested in bringing in new customers. So it's good I would like to see them invest more in the community as well. So I'd like to see them be a little more competitive as well to keep their customers. So I would love to see that information when you get it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mercer.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chairman.
Councilor Farwell.
Just a couple of things. Mr. Mercer, I've looked at your Form 990 tax filings for nonprofits, and is it correct that you have over $1 million in reserve?
That I don't believe is the case.
Well, okay, then how much, what do you say you have? And perhaps the form that I looked at is old, maybe it's been amended. What would you say that the cash on hand for BCA is?
I defer to the board
Good
president.
evening, Mr. Miranda.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Probably right now is probably has about 700,000.
70,000?
700.
700,000. Okay, and so that's after receipt of our 675,000, and
No, that's the total.
that's the total.
Yep. Like right now in the bank, you're asking, that's what it's in the bank.
Okay, but you've expended, well, 8 months of the fiscal year, you've expended quite a bit of money for salaries and,
No. So we get that money every 3 months,
right,
168.
yeah.
So we just got it, I believe in March.
What is the budget for BCA, for the staff and the production? And I've never seen a budget. I mean, we hand over this money each year through the mayor's appropriation, and then we approve it. But quite frankly, I have never seen how it's spent, where it goes.
I'll give him.
Scott's going to pass the profit and loss sheet for the fiscal year of 2022.
2022?
Yes.
How about 2023?
We're in that year now.
Oh, you're in a different fiscal year than we are?
Yes. We run by the calendar month, January to December.
Oh, you're on a calendar year basis. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mercer, there have been several times that either during one of our meetings or during weekends, people will tune into a program, and I think the most recent one was a zoning board, and there was absolutely no audio. And I'm having a hard time understanding how we can broadcast something, not we, and we, it is a team effort. How can we broadcast something and no one notices that there's no audio? I mean, it always seems like we have to file a complaint before someone reacts, and then it gets corrected.
Sure. Not to pass the buck, but 9 times out of 10, it's Comcast issue oriented. We internally, we test our equipment and we check to see if there's audio. And if there is no audio, we troubleshoot it right there. But the head end can have issues, and that's a Comcast issue. So the only thing we can do is reach out to them and notify them. They make us create a ticket, and then they address that issue.
Do we monitor it during weekends? Or,
Oh, yeah. We
do?
monitor it, yeah. We monitor it constantly, yes.
Okay.
Weekdays, weekends, evenings, yeah.
Okay. I'm only one counselor, but I would find it very helpful before we finally approve this money for the next fiscal year, beginning July 1st, our fiscal year. I'd like to see your proposed or projected budget. In other words, where will the money be spent? What upgrades may be undertaken? What new staff may be hired? I mean, the mayor decides on how much money he will allocate to you, but it does come from the subscribers in the Brockton area. So I would just like to know, what are the subscribers paying for when the money is appropriated or given to BCA?
Sure, no problem there. We set a budget for $675 every year and how it's broken out. So from that 2022, you should have a list of expenditures that we budgeted for.
All right.
All right, and we can continue to give that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam
You're
Chair.
very welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else, counselors?
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Thank you. A motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Item number 9, ordered that the following named sum be, and the same is hereby transferred, as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $300,000 from Fire Department Personal Services other than overtime to Fire Department Personal Services overtime. Invited Brian Nardelli, Fire Chief, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman. Nice to have you back.
Thank
Good evening,
you.
councilors. Tonight I come before you to ask for a transfer from monies within my own budget. One of the things that I'm trying to get out ahead of is the setting of the new rates with the new contract with overtime expenses to finish out this year, as well as, although we did not have many injuries, no injuries from the Brockton Hospital fire, we did have about 6 multiple alarm fires just after that, where we did have a number of members injured that are out short-term, long-term right now, and that kind of put us in kind of a difficult spot expending for staffing purposes. So this is money that I've found and then gone through the CFO's office to make sure we were okay to move this money, and we just want to move it from personal services over to regular overtime.
Counselors?
Motion to recommend favorably to this full city council.
Thank you. A motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. It carries. Good night. Mr. Clerk?
Item number 10, ordered that in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, the city hereby accepts as a gift from Mr. Arthur Byers and submitted to the City Council by Mayor Robert F. Sullivan, subject under the said statute for approval by the City Council of Brockton as follows: the donation of a tree to be planted in D.W. Field Park as a Mother's Day gift for his wife. All costs associated for this planting will be incurred by Mr. Byers. Invited Robert Sullivan, Mayor, Arthur Byers.
Councilors, Mayor Sullivan was unable to be with us this evening. Mr. Carpenter, Commissioner Carpenter is here. He is not on the invited guest list. Does anyone have a problem with him speaking? Great, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, councilors. So this is a Mother's Day gift offered by Mr. Byers for his wife to be planted in the center section of the park, so between Oak Street and South Street. The exact location is yet to be determined, as we're trying to make sure that we plant it once and it doesn't have to get moved for any future renovations that we're doing in that area of the park. It's going to be a flowering dogwood tree, a very pretty tree, and we're hoping to get it in the ground prior to Mother's Day.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
On the motion, Mr. Carpenter, who waters it in the first year?
So what we'll do is we'll have a watering bag that will water for about 2 weeks, and we'll just keep refilling that. I think that's the least we can do for the donation of a tree.
Right, and do you select the source of the tree?
I do not. Mr. Byers has a pretty reputable, I know which landscape company, nursery he's getting it from. It's a very reputable company, but as you know, I can't specify any one particular business, so not to violate any ethics rules.
And will your people plant it?
So yes, we will actually do the physical planting.
It's a lovely gesture by Mr. Byers, it really
It is.
Thank you. Motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
Number 11, resolve, be it resolved by the Brockton City Council to invite Tim Carpenter, Superintendent of Parks and Cemeteries, and Eric Duquette, General Foreman of Cemeteries for the City of Brockton, and area funeral directors to come before the council to provide an update on the cemetery's rules and regulations and discuss the rules affecting their businesses as they operate in the City of Brockton. Invited Timothy Carpenter, Superintendent of Parks and Cemeteries, Eric Duquette, General Foreman of Cemeteries, George Lopes, Lopes Funeral Home, George F. Fisk III, Funeraries Multicultural, David Russell, Russell and Pica Funeral Home, Ann Conley Rowan, Conley Funeral and Cremation, Lisa and Gregory Belcher, Waite Funeral Home.
Good evening.
Good evening, councilors. Good evening. I'm happy to be here tonight to answer any and all of your questions.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Carpenter, as you know, I'm the one that actually filed this resolve to bring the area funeral directors to come here and voice their concern. I have been approached by several funeral directors in the community that actually have voiced their issue with the number of burials that are done on a daily basis in our city. I had a decent conversation with Mr. Duquette the other day at the cemetery, and I understood some of the things that he was basically saying in terms of the number of funerals that could be had, at least at Melrose. But that being said, we still have to work with these area funeral homes because from what I understand, funerals are not restricted just to Brocktonians in the sense, or residents of the city of Brockton. Sometimes you get calls from someone who's residing outside of Brockton to be buried in Brockton. And it does take that one spot or two spots away from the residents of the city or the current residents of the city to have their funerals. We've had several instances where families had to wait over a week or so to get their loved ones buried in the city because of the limit of the number of funerals that you can have in the community. So I felt that it made sense to bring everybody together, bring everybody on board for us to discuss this once and for all in terms of what your rules are, what your regulations are, what prevents you from having more than 2 funerals a day, and why can't we not do what some of these other communities are doing?
So I guess I would address it this way. It's not that physically we could not perform more than 2 burials in a day, and there are many times that we perform more than 2 burials in a day. There are many times that the local funeral directors or a funeral director, whether it is an in-town one or an out-of-town one, has an emergency situation, and we are more than capable of taking care of that request. So the general rule is the 2 burials are, generally we like to say we cannot do more than 1 burial in a particular section. We have 2 particular sections, single double E and the new Central Grove, where we won't do 2 burials in the same day because we're going in order. So that would require multiple open graves, which creates a dangerous situation for those attending the funeral as well as the employees. We really pride ourselves on presenting a very professionally run internment. And that means the preparation of the particular section, whether it's mowing, trim work, removing leaves, removing snow from that particular section to make it, again, as professional looking as possible. All those things take time. The other issue that you can run into, and we do request an hour between interment requests, because if you have 2 large funerals in relatively close sections, there really isn't a lot of place to put all those cars. We prefer not to have people to have to walk across various sections of the cemetery to get to where maybe their loved one is being interned. The other thing that I might mention is, what we've seen over the past several years is the time of the first funeral request for the day has seemed to have gotten later and later in the day. So where typically, when I first started, our first funeral was maybe around 9:30, 10 o'clock. It's now 11:30, 12 o'clock. As you know, all the employees go out of their way, to be quite honest with you, to perform their jobs as effectively and efficiently as possible. But by union contract, technically overtime is not mandatory. So that is any time after 2:30, and then Saturdays and Sundays, of course. Saturdays are exceedingly popular for burials. This coming Saturday, as a matter of fact, we have 2 burials. So if there is ever a delay, it simply may be that the family is requesting a Saturday and a Saturday only. And again, the 4 staff that are assigned to the cemetery department, I can't commend them enough for the job that they do up there.
Well, Madam Chair, I can't see behind the pole, but I believe there's at least 3 funeral directors here.
Oh, yeah, there's. Huh? Yeah, there's, yeah.
Because I see Mrs. Conley, Mr. Fisk, and Mr. Belcher. Can you guys come up and basically state some of these issues that at least I continuously hear from you folks, that it's causing you some issues with some folks in this community?
Yeah, Moses. Yeah, George Fisk, owner of Funeral Multicultural, 51 years licensed Mass Funeral Director, also on the Board of Health. I think first of all, I'd like to commend Melrose Cemetery. Now they have Cohasset and they also have Union Cemetery, which they didn't have. And these guys do a heck of a job. I'm going to tell you, they do a heck of a job. Sometimes you just can't have, more than 2 burials, depending on which section, which they explain to you in a lot of times. And a lot of times that you find out that, especially Saturday, we've only got a half a day, so you can only fit so many in that time. I think in a perfect world, years ago, I think Ann and I remember, working with our dads, we used to ride around and we wouldn't close the casket until all the family left. Well, nowadays, with the different cultures, and, I had a funeral home in the Cape Verde Islands, Elias Funerarias, and, a lot of the cultures that we deal with, they just don't leave, and it's hard. So I can't really blame it all on the cemetery. Sometimes it's us. We're late, and it's hard to get people out. Basically, what I've started within the last 5-10 years is that I have the family come up, if it's getting too late, and I know I have like a 10:30 appointment at the cemetery, 11:30, I have the family come up and help me close the casket. It's like a family type thing. And I found that works a little bit better, because once it's closed, then the people really, want to leave then. So it works pretty well that way. And, that's one of the things I've done. Another thing that I might, you could think about the cemetery, if you had something on their letterhead, to hurry these people up, know that they have a 10:30 report. We have a 10:30 report. And it's going to hurt another funeral director if we get there at 12 and they have a 12:30 report. Maybe there could be a penalty, maybe $250, $300 that this family's got to pay if they want to stay, because it hurts the other family and the other funeral director that's coming in. But something on their stationery so the people know ahead of time that they have to, leave the funeral home. But there's so many different things. The priest could be late at the church. There's so many different things that could help out. But I think it's, Eric knows, I'm always early. I'm never late. So I just tend it that way, so it seems to work well for me. But those might be two things that might help out. And I really don't blame it all on the cemetery. Sometimes it's our families that we're dealing with. And, that's all I'd like to say about the thing. But I do stick up for the cemetery because they do a beautiful, beautiful job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Belcher?
Good evening, Mr. Belcher.
Madam Chair, councilors, Melrose Cemetery, beautiful cemetery. They got a super foreman, Eric Duquette, behind us. Does a wonderful job. I can't say more enough. And Tim Carpenter, acting cemetery superintendent. And I say acting because this gentleman wears a lot of hats in the city. So we have to commend Mr. Carpenter too. But what I'm going to say is things are changing in Brockton. We don't have 9 o'clock masses. We have late masses. We have different cultures. But we work with the cemetery superintendent and the foreman by calling them and telling them what time we're going to be there. And it might be another funeral director who doesn't call or is an hour late and making the cemetery workers sitting there waiting an hour. Now that is unsatisfactory. So I would like to see more communication with the funeral directors. The ones that are here now, we all communicate with each other. There's only 5 funeral homes in Brockton, and the population's well over 100,000. And when I started, there were 15 funeral homes. So you can see the work we're doing. We're working almost 24 hours in the middle of the night while the rest sleep. We work very hard, so we have to commend us funeral directors too. That's all I got to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam?
Mrs. Rowan. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Ann Rowan from Conley Funeral Home, and there's not much I can say more than what you've already heard. The crew at Melrose Cemetery, they work hard, and they're always there to help us, and they understand what we're up against. So I just want to say that they're doing a fabulous job, and I hope they can continue on. Maybe a few more staff members might help in the budget. I'm not sure if I'm speaking out of place or not, but that might be helpful. So thank you very much for listening to us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, we have the general foreman here as well from the funeral, if we could hear from him. Because
Eric?
I was at the cemetery, I believe, on Saturday, and I was educated basically in the ways of the cemetery in a way, and I was very appreciative, and you guys have been great. I mean, I go to the cemetery more often than I care to admit, but I do find you folks, you and your staff, to be very professional, very caring, and again, I brought this whole thing up so that, like I said in the beginning, so we can all come together and listen with one voice and one mandate in the sense of what the rules and regs and some of the difficulties that you guys face up there as well.
There's really not a hell of a lot more to say other than what Greg and Ian had already said. As far as doing the 2 burials, it's tough because it's a hazard, especially the single double E section in CG. It's just dangerous. So we try to stay away from that as much as possible.
Now, is there any way that we can, perhaps reach out to some of the religious organizations in the city to see if we can go back to some earlier masses for funerals?
Well, there's other days in the week as well. A lot of the problem, like we're already booked out, I believe, this Saturday coming up, the following Saturday, and I already have one for the following Saturday. So those that get, and if you're only doing 2, there's 5 other days during the week. Pick another day, you know what I mean? There's other days that there is slots available, but people like to go for Saturdays.
Well, some people don't like to go at all, so,
Yeah, I don't blame 'em.
hopefully that's going to be some, but I do think about this because I know that at Edithstein, probably one of the largest users of the cemetery in the sense that our funeral mass is now at 10 o'clock. And the Cape Verdean Mass tends to run for about an hour 15 minutes or so. So that puts us well into the 11 o'clock hour. And by the time you get to the cemetery, you're looking at 12 o'clock.
And it's an hour up there, and that's where that creates a problem. Because you've already done your hour and a half. Now it's an hour up there. And to get people to leave, to get to another one at 1 o'clock or 12:30, becomes a problem with our vehicles trying to get from point A to point B as well.
Now, when you get a call from a funeral director, do you have the option to say, look, my time slot is 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, or you just leave that up to them to decide when they want to do
No,
the
we
burial?
always discuss it. I think they'll agree with that they'll call me, whether it's at night or I have one for this particular time. And we usually try to work things out. We don't really, it's very rarely that it's like it can't be done. I always try to accommodate whatever and whenever it needs to be done.
Well, I too want to commend the work that you guys do up there. I don't know exactly if any of my colleagues have any questions to ask any of you, but I do want to commend you for the work that you do there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Farwell.
Just a clarification from Mr. Carpenter. The workers come in and work from 6 to 2:30, did you say?
So for the year, that's April to December, that is the general operating hours, yes, sir.
Okay, now, and I tried to pull it up on my phone to reconfirm, but if I'm right, I think that the fiscal year appropriation was $368,000 for the cemetery. Does that sound about right?
The operating budget?
Yeah.
No, I think it's a little bit more than that, sir.
Okay, but you have the foreman, you have a hoisting operator.
Correct.
And you have 2 maintenance people.
Correct.
Okay. In my opinion, folks, that's not sufficient. Because, number one, if that hoisting operator goes down, that requires a special license.
So we are, I'm sorry to interrupt, sir.
Cross-train people?
So we are lucky enough that one of our maintenance men also has his hoisting operator's license, so he can fill in should our hoist operator be out. Mr. Duquette also has his hoist license, so he could fill in should we get into a pinch.
Okay.
Actually, all four of us.
All four
of you?
Yep.
And if Saturday is a popular day, then maybe it's time to hire a couple of people to work Tuesday through Saturday instead of Monday through Friday. I mean, I looked at their budget, and I also looked at the projected revenue. aren't you almost self-sufficient? Don't you bring in over $300,000 a year?
We're very close, but the way that the funds get split up, especially with sale of lots and graves, so a new grave, 2/3 of that goes into a perpetual care account, while 1/3 goes into a sale and lots of graves account.
Okay.
So when you sell a new grave, those funds are split up there so that we don't see those in a way, if you understand what I'm saying. The opening fees, the vaults, which we have to pay for, but we do make a little bit of money on, those all generate revenue that, yes, goes to help fund that department.
It's just my opinion, I don't think we can require that much more of you unless we're willing to invest in more personnel to accommodate the demand for cemetery services. Now, whatever the mayor works out with you when you put in, and Mr. Claxon, when you put in your budget request, I just don't see you being able to expand on what we offer without having more people. And we have to keep in mind the people you have are entitled to vacation. You know, if one of the maintenance people goes on vacation for a couple of weeks, he or she is entitled to that, and, you know, now you're down a person, and when you have such a small staff, that's a big percentage of the workforce to lose.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying to all of us and to you is, I think it's time we take a look at the staffing, if we're going to be serious about expanding services. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Mr. Carpenter.
Good evening.
Just quick question. Where are we on capacity at Melrose? It looks that we're kind of nearing capacity. Is there any expectation of expansion? Can we just talk about that a little bit?
So we do have several sections that are filling up pretty quickly. Our newest section, Central Grove, I think we're right around 240 in burials, or lots that have started to be used. And so we projected about 5 years there. We're about 2 years in. It's going to be close to get to our 5-year. So we are currently working on future expansion that we're hoping to cover from the main entrance to about the Fireman's Museum. So heading back towards the Stoughton line. There's quite a bit of usable area in there, which we would probably get the most usable area for the funds we have available.
With the current laws, I know we talked briefly, I think it was at budget time last year, about double stacking or, but with what we currently have as our procedure, how much longer do you think the city has at Melrose, given your 5-year plans?
So technically, the property owned by the cemetery department at the Melrose specifically goes almost over to, and I don't know the name of the road, so you're going to have to forgive me, but right by the Burger King, almost on the Stoughton line.
That's going back.
So that's going to require a much, much larger investment, because it's going to necessitate a separate entrance, because there are some wetland issues that you would run into to get vehicles, both our vehicles and people who are coming to intern a loved one. So it would require a separate entrance. It's going to be a hefty bill. So we're trying to utilize, right, we need a new road. So we're going to try and utilize every square inch of what we can quickly get at as soon as we can.
And that, and the majority of that area is moving towards the museum, that wooded area towards the museum.
Yes, we have no more room to the south to expand.
Okay, and what do you, how much, say years, 10, 15 years?
I would not hazard a guess, to be honest with you, because I don't know specifically how much of that area between, let's say, our single double E section and the almost Stoughton line is usable due to the wetlands issues.
Are we taking a look at that now? Is that something
So
that's?
that'll be phase 4. I need to get phase 2, which is the expansion out front, done, and then we can start working on that.
So we got 2 more phases, or potentially 3 more phases until?
A lot of those phases are the engineering portion of it.
Okay, oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, I appreciate that information. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Thank you, Mr. Duquette.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilors, I'll entertain a
Motion to recommend favorably.
I wanted just to,
Okay, Councilor Rodriguez.
well, I wanted to ask you, and I think Mr. Duquette and I talked a little bit about it the other day, in terms of the Union Cemetery. I know the city just took over it not too long ago, but it seems that there's some space there as well that could be used for burial. Is that something that you're looking into? Because some of us are getting a little longer on the tooth, and we're going to be looking for a place to rest real soon.
And one of the things that, one of the areas that we have identified is at the top of the hill, which might be a nice location for an additional veterans lot. So that might be a possible use for up there. The lower, what I'm going to call the lower bowl, which is sort of abuts Snow Park and Salisbury Park, down in that lower section. We're going to have to do a little more exploration down there because it tends to get very wet, and we don't want to have any issues with burials in an exceedingly wet area.
I'm sure they won't complain. But at the same time, if there's actually some spots, because, I mean, we're a city of 100,000 plus people, and every year, quite a few people pass, and the way we're going, chances are there's not going to be enough space to bury some of us that might want to be buried in Brockton in a few years.
The other option we're looking into, Counselor, is a columbarium, which is sort of for cremains only, and it's, obviously varying size, but that way at least we're not using full burial grounds for ashes only.
What about stackables like they do in Randolph, in the sense, above ground to do those things?
We have such a high water table in that particular area.
No, stackables above ground.
Above ground?
Yeah.
Oh, so full burial above ground. I haven't really thought of that one. I don't know that we have the area to do that, but it's something we could look into.
I mean, if you can extend the life of that cemetery by a couple more years, I think it would do its thing.
As I said, every inch that we can find, we are going to take advantage of.
I don't think a stackable would do any different than being a full burial. You're still looking at the same amount of space, if not even more so, with an above-ground burial, because we do have a couple of those up there already that are pretty large.
No, I went to a funeral. I don't know why I'm talking about funerals. That's all. I went to a funeral in Randolph, and they actually had these graves, stackable up to like 3 high, 4 high, or whatever it was. And it seems to, in an area where they couldn't go down, they went up. That might be something that you guys might want to look into as well.
You can look into that as well.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming, and thank you for at least educating some of us on this particular issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Thank you. The motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. It passes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Item number 12, resolve, whereas the Brockton Board of Health is charged with oversight of the Health Department, now therefore be it resolved, the 3 appointed members of the City of Brockton Board of Health be requested to appear before a committee of the City Council to discuss the policies, oversight, and operations of the department. Invited Dr. Mary T. Brophy, Dr. Craig Andrade, George F. Fisk III.
Good evening, Mr. Fisk, and here you are.
Chairwoman, I guess I'm here. I don't know where anybody else is.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
This matter is somewhat moot, as another issue is winding its way through the Ordinance Committee and the City Council, and I really don't see any reason to go back and rehash issues that have been raised and discussions that have been had, so it would be my hope that we could table this matter, unless there's objection.
Are you moving?
Motion to table.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion that's been made and properly seconded to table. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I was looking for a discussion with the counselor, too, today.
Get out of here while the getting's good.
I'm still recovering from all this cemetery talk, so
So look at gift horse in the mouth.
Item number 13, resolve, whereas land use and management through zoning ordinances have a direct effect on economic development and neighborhood preservation, and whereas the city hired the Collins Center and Barrett Consulting Group to conduct an overview of zoning issues within the city, and whereas all councilors and their constituents have an interest in the review, update, and application of zoning ordinances, now therefore be it resolved, representatives from the Collins Center and Barrett Consulting Group be invited to a meeting of a committee of the council in January 2023 to discuss the scope and focus of the zoning review for which they were retained. A January 2023 meeting should allow sufficient time for the invitees to schedule an appearance and provide any materials to be reviewed by councilors. Invited Rob Bay, Director of Planning and Economic Development, Morgan Clark, the Collins Center.
Evening.
Good evening, councilors. How are you? I'm excited to be here tonight to begin what I hope is a conversation with both the city council and with the residency at large about zoning here in the city of Brockton. As you may know, the city zoning ordinance was adopted in 1968 or 9. There haven't been very many amendments to it since that time. It has been a while. But as a growing municipality, it behooves us to take a look at the zoning ordinance to understand how it is representative in the actual land use that is happening in the city, and to better understand how that affects long-term development prospects. And so the planning department brought on the Collins Center for Public Management at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, to help us understand. It started out as a conformity study. So what our zoning ordinance says X, is that actually representative of what is actually on the ground? And we're hoping that this starts, as I said, a much longer conversation to help us all modernize our zoning ordinance. So with that, I'd like to introduce Morgan Clark from the Collins Center, and she will introduce us to her team. And from there, they have a small presentation, and then we'll work our way through it.
Good evening, Ms. Clark.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having us. As consultants, we don't often see communities taking a proactive stance to review and modernize their zoning code. It speaks highly of Brockton that you've had the foresight to take this topic on and work to meet your community's planning and development needs. So we feel really fortunate to have had the chance to work on this project for you. As Mr. May indicated, I'm Morgan Clark. I'm the project manager from the Collins Center. Here with me is Anthony Wilson. He's a project associate. He did most of the work, so I'm going to have him give the brief presentation. But also on the team, as your resolve showed, was Judy Barrett from the Barrett Planning Group and Sandeep Johnny from the UMass Boston team as well. So.
Good evening, Mr. Wilson.
Good evening, Council.
Thank you for joining us.
Excuse me?
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having us. It's very exciting working on this particular project, and so we're proud to present it to you and answer any questions that the council may have. Excuse me, the committee. And pardon me, I have allergies, and I don't think I took the appropriate notes this morning. So if you turn to the second slide, talks about the purpose of the project. As Mr. May and Ms. Clark explained, the city hired the Collins Center to analyze the city's zoning, specifically looking at 3 questions. Does Brockton zoning ordinance reflect the actual built environment? 2, does the Brockton zoning ordinance align with the city's economic development and housing goals? And 3, how does Brockton compare with other gateway and urban cities? And I believe the draft report was already circulated, so there's a list of comparator communities that the project was looking at. I'll just answer these briefly before we go through the slides. So, does Brockton zoning ordinance reflect the actual city's built environment? Based on the analysis, the answer is broadly no, mainly focused in your residential districts. That would be R1, R2, R3, and I think R5 are the most prevalent districts. R1 B is your biggest district, comprising almost 60% of the city. And as the report says, and as we'll see later in this presentation, most of the city is zoned for single-family residential, which can be an issue in a city of Brockton size with the influx of individuals coming to live here. Another interesting aspect of the Brockton zoning ordinance is that it's what has been historically one of the restrictive implementations of zoning. So historically, communities implemented zoning in a way that said certain things can be in certain places in our city because we think that's appropriate. Over time, a more modern approach has been that the zoning doesn't have to be so restrictive. Neighborhoods are made of different types of uses. The Brockton zoning ordinance sort of reflects that older view, which says that residences are here, commercial development is here, and industrial uses are here. Whereas in more modern terms, we usually or a lot of communities sort of mix those uses. So when we get to the recommendations, you'll see there's a recommendation about allowing mixed use more broadly in Brockton. Does the city's zoning ordinance align with the city's economic development goals and housing goals? Again, the short answer is no. The city had done a report through the local regional planning agency several years ago. One of the main outputs from that report was allowing more housing development, more density. Unfortunately, the city's zoning ordinance does not really permit that. I have to sort of make one caveat here. The zoning ordinance does have some overlay districts. Based on our review of the GIS in the assessor's database, we unable to determine if any of those overlay districts were applied to any parts of the city. There's the Brockton downtown, I forget the exact term, but the Brockton downtown overlay district, which does have some of that increased density as well as some mixed uses that would be beneficial here. So it may be a case of implementing that as something more than an overlay district. Again, these are options for the city, for the council to consider. And again, I'm just giving a high-level overview. And then the third, how does Brockton compare to other gateway and urban cities in Massachusetts? I'm going to focus on just 3 areas here, primarily because they came up in a lot of our conversations as well as our analysis of the data. A lot of people who have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals indicated that one of the primary reasons was for frontage issues, that is the width that the lot has to have on the street, as well as lot area. That's the size of the total lot to comply with Brockton's ordinance. Brockton has, I think, the second or third most restrictive, in other words, requiring the most in both of these areas in other communities. I think the only ones that are higher, I had them listed somewhere, were Taunton, as well as another sort of more rural community. So that's at a high level. Now let me go back to the slide. So if you go to slide number 3, how did we do this? How do we engage in this study? We did a document review. We reviewed a lot of the housing as well as the economic development plans that the city has engaged in over the past decade. We reviewed the city's ordinances. We reviewed a number of decisions from the ZBA, as well as some other material. We interviewed 14 individuals at various levels of Brockton's building community. That included builders, developers, officials, your members of the ZBA, members of the building department, I think 2 city councilors, as well as Mr. May. The comparisons were done by analyzing, this kind of goes back to document review, by analyzing the zoning ordinances of the other comparative communities, specifically looking at what they required builders to comply with, as well as what those actual numbers were, and where appropriate, comparing them to what is the requirement here in Brockton. And lastly, as you'll see in the report, there's a mapping analysis, which I have to get into all the sort of details, but basically, once we determined what the parcels, what was actually on the parcels, do those comply with the zoning ordinance, then we color-coded the map to indicate, take these numbers, 90% not complying in terms of lot area. What does that look like on a map of the city? And so those maps are in the report. So our conclusions, which I kind of stated at the beginning, Brockton has a restrictive residential district dimensional requirements that don't align with a lot of the reports that the city's done over the past 10 years, particularly around increasing housing choice and allowing neighborhood scale mixed-use development. Mixed uses ranging from, and I apologize, I'm on slide 4. Mixed uses ranging from top-of-the-shop apartments over retail stores and homes converted to professional offices are common in all comparison cities except Taunton, and they play a central role in urban smart growth policy. Again, that type of development is not permitted under the existing zoning ordinance. And Brockton has a number of planning initiatives that it would like to move forward on. However, the zoning, again, does not align with those initiatives. So in order for Mr. May to go out and speak to potential developers or individuals to bring their businesses here, some of the things that they may discuss may not align with the current zoning in the city, which, you know, from the perspective of a developer, may mean additional costs in terms of going before an additional body that they may not have to go in front of another community. As a sort of a side note on that, one of the things that we heard in one of the interviews is that at a minimum, going before the Zoning Board of Appeals can cost $2,000 to $3,000 in terms of having plans drawn, possibly hiring an attorney. There were some projects, not a huge number, but some that had to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals multiple times. And certain projects, depending on what they entail, have to go before the Planning Board and the Zoning and the ZBA. So those are just costs inherent in the process, and communities have to think about when and where do we want to impose those costs. Based on the lack of conformity for a number of parcels, Brockton may be in a situation of imposing those costs on some developers where it may not have the intention to. So our recommendations, starting on page 5. The City Council should perform a comprehensive overhaul of the zoning ordinance, or we recommend that, and by that, I mean mainly looking at the zoning ordinance, looking at the city as a whole, getting input from the various stakeholders, and thinking about whether or not it wants to make targeted changes to the zoning ordinance that may target specific areas of the city. Some of the sort of simpler ones would be a reorganization to improve the structure and format of the zoning ordinance. Brockton currently has what we call a pyramid zoning structure. That is to say, if I look at the requirements for the R1 zoning district, it says, you know, it can only be single-family homes. They have to do X, Y, and Z in terms of height or lot width. But if I go to R2, it may say all the requirements from R1 plus whatever else we say here. And as you go further into the zoning ordinance, you have to remember, you know, as a person reading it and thinking about doing something in the community, have to remember what the previous section said. A lot of communities have moved to a zoning chart. Basically, you list all of the potential uses on one side of the chart, and then you list the districts, and then you sort of mark off. You may, if anyone has any experience with zoning, you may have seen this. There'll be an X or some sort of indication that says this is required, or this is allowed, or you'll need a special permit. And you just have to follow the chart to look at where your use is and where you think you're going to be in the particular community. And it's a really easy way to find out whether or not your particular project will be complying with the city's regulations. We also recommend a comprehensive policy level overview. Again, that's part of the stakeholder engagement. Where does the city want to be? What does it want its future to be? Is it comfortable with where it's at? What are the policy goals of the council, the mayor, and the various constituents that make up the city? I already talked about, I'm moving on to slide 6, I already talked about the ordinance clarity. Consider amendments to these ordinances to allow for mixed-use development. Again, I'd heard earlier in the meeting there was some conversation about the concern about the erosion of the commercial and industrial base of the city. One of the things that we did hear during the interviews was that I have a distinct memory of a particular developer who had built a building, and on the first floor of it there was sort of a commercial space, and ultimately it did not perform at the level that this person had anticipated because of the lack of foot traffic. Again, the way Brockton is shaped, you have a commercial corridor with commercial and industrial space that's sort of run along the highway and the train tracks that go through the middle of the city. And then on the sides, you've got your deep residential going out to the edges and the other communities that surround the city. By allowing mixed use, you can bring more density into the middle of the city and potentially increase the foot traffic and the viability of certain commercial developments. So again, those are things for the city to explore that may be impacted by your zoning. Our third recommendation is eliminate the gross floor area minimum. Now, I'm a lawyer by training, but I'm not providing any legal advice. Generally speaking, there are no other comparative communities that have a gross floor area minimum. Generally speaking, Massachusetts state law sort of prohibits that type of practice. Towns are not allowed to regulate, cities and towns are not allowed to regulate the internal functions of the internal compartments of a building. So to the extent that anything like this would be upheld, it would be sort of in the range of what they call the bulk size of the building. In other words, the community can regulate sort of how close it is to the street, how close it is to other buildings, but the interiors are not usually allowed to be regulated. I don't think this has been challenged in Brockton, but we would suggest talking to legal counsel and thinking about potentially removing this if there's a will to do so. Our fourth recommendation is to consider allowing two-family, three-family, multifamily residences in R1C. Again, that's one of your bigger, that is your biggest district in the city. Looking at the split lot requirements. Again, split lots are perhaps you have a residential district and a commercial district, and the districts were created in such a way that they run through the middle of the lot. That can create some confusion around what can be used on that lot or what can be built. And different communities have different regulations that allow that determination to be made. Our review of Brockton's regulation, it's a little bit ambiguous and can lead to some confusion, and some of our interviewees mentioned that, and so perhaps looking at that, it's a little bit of a technical thing, but perhaps looking at that may help in some edge cases. So continued recommendations, these are on process improvements on slide 7. One of the things we did notice in our interviews and as reviewing the data, the city is on Mass GIS, which all cities in the state are. However, it's our understanding that the sort of official record or city map of where the parcels are and where the districts align is sort of maintained on a piece of paper in, I think, the building department. It was a little confusing as to how updates were made and whose responsibility it was to do that. Again, not saying that it's not happening, it's just saying that that was caused a little bit of confusion. And so maybe reviewing that process of how updates are made and where they're recorded and who's the responsible party, and are there ways to improve that. We also suggested a permitting coordinator that is someone who could be housed either in the building department or in the planning department that can walk applicants, particularly we're thinking about ZBA applicants, through the process so they know the types of documents that the body will be looking for, when they're going to be heard, and things of that nature. Another interesting one was training around building departments. None of the ZBA members appear to have received any training on the application of the zoning ordinance. And that's not a particular, that's not a knock on the ZBA members. When we met with them, they all seemed to be very conscientious. They all seemed to care a lot about what it was that they were doing. And you can tell by, as you look at their meeting logs, that they're meeting regularly and considering the stuff in front of them. However, it seems to be the practice that the longest serving member sort of advises the other board members as to sort of how to engage in this process. They could benefit from potentially receiving a little bit more guidance from a zoning expert, and there are trainings offered by state organizations that help to train people on the zoning ordinance. And I also point out, and this is deeper into the report, is that we did notice the high level of use or variances that are actually permitted by the Brockton Zoning Board of Appeals. Variances, as some people may know, are really supposed to be only granted very rarely, especially use variances. It's not really, you don't think of it like you would think of other permitting. It really is saying that there is a super exceptional case here, and we have to allow this person to sort of deviate from our zoning in order to allow that parcel to be used sort of in any fashion, for someone to even make use of it. The fact that perhaps there are 30 or 40 variances granted in the city of Brockton yearly is maybe an indication that they may not all be valid grants. So then I'll move on to, and then we also recommend updating zoning applications, particularly And this is not unique to Brockton, but may identify the parcel to be adjudicated by the street number, by the address. It's often better to use the parcel ID, just as an example. It's a more clear indication of what it is that we're looking at. Street numbers and street names can be ambiguous. And that's about it for the formal presentation we have for you guys. I know it's been a long night, so we don't want to overwhelm you, but we are available for questions or comments.
Councilor Azak.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you so much for this presentation. Being a frequent member to the zoning meetings, it's very interesting what you just mentioned about use variances, because I believe that's the majority of what our board gets in front of them. So that's very interesting. A few things came up in your presentation that really caught my attention, and one of them was when you spoke about your zoning chart. How do we do that? That sounds really, who else, this is maybe a question to Mr. May, but who else has seen this presentation besides us? Have you shared it with the zoning board members? Is anybody else? Who else is getting this information?
Councilor, this is the first presentation and first discussion of this report. We want to, it's still a draft. We want to get your input on this. I know we have interviewed some city councilors. This is an opportunity for more to participate. And when this is, wrapped and done, this is something that we'll make a presentation to the planning board and the zoning board to continue discussion.
Very good. So I'm not sure which councilors have been involved. I wasn't sure who.
It has been anonymous for me, but I'll let them.
Oh, okay. No,
I've given them a list of people who I'd asked to interview, but
Sure.
I don't know.
Can we know who? It's public information.
If that's
Yes,
okay with
who's
council.
been involved?
Okay, we interviewed the council chair and also Councilor Thompson.
Okay, very good. And so this zoning chart, so this, like I said, I would love to see that. I think that from what was explained by Mr. Wilson, it's very, seems like ideal. I would love to see that. It seems to facilitate the process. So that's something that I really would like to see. So,
If I may, through the chair, the zoning chart is a relatively, relatively easy lift in the sense that you could keep all of the regulations that you have and just sort of have them just look a different way, so that they'd be clear for individuals.
so whose job would it be to put this together? Would it be to create that chart? I'm figuring, would it be the planning department or the building department
I
or?
think that would be up for the city to determine.
It would
Okay,
actually be the city clerk's office.
okay, very good. So, just a few things. So just to compliment you, the permitting coordinator, I think this is something that we really need. I mean, as city councilors, I know I get a lot of calls from developers or, I think, residents or whoever. I think it would definitely be important to have somebody just designated for permitting. I think that would definitely help. And I'm sad to hear that after all these years, we still don't have training for zoning board and planning board members. I could have sworn they do have some sort of training. They don't have anything, or?
May I?
Yes,
through
of
you,
course.
Madam Chair.
Whoever can answer that.
So what we found in the interviews was that there is training offered by, I just forget the name, there's a state-wide entity that offers the training. My understanding is that it has been offered, or the information has been shared, and maybe it has not been utilized.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think this is great, and I thank you again for the study, and I hope this moves forward and, with some of these ideas come to fruition. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilor Farwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Clark and to our gentleman here, you may not know what you've kind of walked into. Quite by accident, Councilor Nicastro and Councilor D'Agostino and I were at a meeting. We didn't even know this was going on. The very people who are supposed to decide zoning and set policy in the city, namely the elected representatives, of the different wards, and 4 of us serve at large, along with the mayor, we had no idea you were here. And just by way of reference, we never received that 2018 Old Colony Planning Council report. Had never seen it before, never distributed to us. So having said that, I want to go back to the contract that was signed between the city and the Collins Center. And all of it seems related to zoning ordinances. But in fact, you've done an operational audit. You've now come in and you've decided we're going to recommend staffing. We're going to recommend changes in how the city solicitor writes ordinances. And it just surprises me a little bit. I thought you were probably going to come up with a plan that says you are not capable of having these types of developments which have occurred in other gateway cities because of these aspects of your zoning. But instead, you kind of morphed into, as I say, an operational audit of city government. And I guess my first question is, because I don't know who the 14 people were that you included in the interviews, did you sit down with the mayor? Because you relied upon a 2018 report and a 2017 report, and I would submit to you the world has changed and the city has changed dramatically. You've had COVID. You've got the rise of e-commerce, where people kind of sit at home now like I do and order things and have them delivered. So it just, would it not have been more advantageous to perhaps meet with the current office holders and the people who set policy for the stated goals instead of relying on older reports?
Thank you for the question, Councilor, through the chair. You know, the project took the direction, like every project that I've been at the Collins Center for almost 2 years now, a lot of the recommendations kind of came from the interviews. So, you know, it wasn't our intent to go into operations. We certainly didn't, we didn't go through org charts or anything like that, but we did get feedback. So sorry, I kind of skipped your first question, or your final question I should answer first. We did not interview the mayor, and your point is well taken. What we tried to do was align where the city had written accepted goals. So I hear you that you weren't familiar with the plan, or the 2 plans, the blueprint and the other. But that's what we had as, you know, written accepted goals of the city as far as housing and economic development. So that's what we use to say, okay, this is what Brockton at some point, I understand though your point about 2017 and 18 were a long time ago. So well taken, and I understand. We were just looking for something to reference as we analyze the written ordinance as well. So these were all written documents to compare.
You know, having served as mayor, and not that we're godlike creatures and heaven knows we're fallible, but I just find it astounding that we would have research and a report published, and the very person who is the chief executive officer of the city, who makes recommendations for spending, who should have the vision that he wants implemented, who earned the right to have that vision, is never included. And I'm not going to belabor the point, but I'm going to go on to page 8 of your report, and I noticed that one of your recommendations is you want the city to have more flexibility to allow 2-family and 3-family and multifamily dwellings. What was referred to as restrictive earlier might also be called advantageous, because to me, if you live somewhere, you ought to have enough green space so that you and your son or daughter or grandchildren can go out and kick a soccer ball, or throw a baseball, or have a backyard party and you're not in someone else's lap so that they're calling the police because you've got a loud party. And so I bristle a little bit at the suggestion that you've got to shrink lots, and you've got to jam more people into an area, and you've got to get more people into the city of Brockton, whereas I think we ought to try to give the people who are here a quality of life. We don't have enough police to answer various calls for service. Fireworks, loud parties, We don't have enough people for traffic enforcement. And so when I read a report that emphasizes more housing, affordable housing, 2- and 3-family, multifamily dwellings, I say to myself, you know, Lord, I think we owe the people who live here first the best possible life we can give them, and then if we want to expand from there, I have no problem doing that. But you also, in addition to recommending the staffing and the training, which I think really was far afield of what you signed for a contract, I just do not see anywhere in that contract that you were called upon to analyze staffing for the city of Brockton. There's a section in here that was of particular interest to me, and I wanted to ask how you would handle it, since you seem to, since you saw it worthwhile to mention. And that is that there was objection from some of the participants, or maybe all of the participants, that the fire chief sits on the zoning board of appeals. And that is another one that I find very hard to comprehend, because if you're going to have major projects, multifamily apartments coming into the city, one would think that you would want to have the fire chief there, because fire safety, protection of the people who live in that building is so paramount. And it just, again, the project team indicated the project team is unaware of another municipality that requires the fire chief to serve on a ZBA. And a few participants felt that the fire department concerns heavily influence decisions. I mean, I would hope they would. So to whomever wants to answer, really, you think having the fire chief on the ZBA, a fire safety professional, is objectionable?
So I'll start with, I think, the first part of your statement first about the density issue. When we were brought on board, I'm pretty confident that the purpose of this research was to start a conversation in the community and on this body about how it wants the city to look, the zoning. So the things that you're bringing up about green space, those are all important concerns that we are not necessarily taking a position on. With regard to the recommendation about single-family, 2-family, 3-family, multifamily lots, when we looked at the request coming to the ZBA that are again, granted in a larger amount than I would have initially anticipated, the majority of them are for increased residential density. So if they're in a residential district, it's to increase the number of dwellings in a particular building, either by adding an addition or allowing it to be multifamily. And in the commercial/industrial districts, it is to allow for the development of usually larger multifamily developments. So that recommendation came from the trend as represented in the ZBA cases towards density. On that point, I would only add, you know, the council, you are elected officials, you have a mandate from your constituents, but I think it would sort of move in the direction of sort of indicating that this should be looked at, because in some sense, your ZBA, zone of boarding appeals, is rezoning the city through the ZBA process. And again, the ZBA is there for a reason, but looking at sort of categorically what it's doing and the numbers and the impacts, that just may be something that the body might want to sort of review and sort of think about. With the question about the fire chief on the ZBA. So we actually didn't make a recommendation about keeping him on or taking him off. The report notes that it's something that individuals that have gone before the board have commented on, and because of the comment, we did look at what other particular comparison communities were doing in that aspect. And again, just noting for the consideration of the body, here's how other communities that Brockton has self-identified as being similar to handle that particular issue. So that piece is primarily informational as this body considers what it wants to do moving forward.
But sir, the contract you signed didn't call for that type of analysis. The contract that you signed was to focus on the zoning ordinances of the city of Brockton and whether it aligns with our stated vision, and you used a vision that's years old. So can you see my point sitting here? Just forgetting I'm a counselor, I'm a resident. Can you see my angst at sitting here saying, if you didn't talk to the mayor and you didn't get together with us as a body, because eventually we would have to approve any zoning, what validity does the study have? And that's what causes me concern. But I know some other people want to talk, and I'm sure some other people will, as with so many different things, we all have different opinions. Page 14. Some participants, and you saw fit to mention this in the draft report, so it had to be important. Some participants also noted that abutter concerns can cause a project not to proceed rather than create opportunities for adjustments to mitigate abutter concerns. Participants also highlighted the practice of city council members voicing concerns at hearings if their ward members had concerns about a project, sometimes amplifying concerns to an outsized degree. What would, we're elected officials. If I have a group of neighborhood residents who are adamantly opposed to a project, frankly, I see my role as giving them a voice before the ZBA and appearing, and to include this in here and make it appear as though somehow the mere appearance of a counselor or counselors stifles development or hinders compromise. I would say that compromise is up to the petitioner and his attorney, his or her attorney. I don't think we're doing anything that shouldn't be done. I mean, I don't know how my other counselors feel about it, but that's extraordinary to put in a draft report. Let me go on, and then I'll let other people. My last question is going to be for Mr. May. The training, again, I did not see that in your contract, that you would morph into deciding to comment on training, a lack of training. Mr. May, you know me well, and I don't pull any punches, so I guess my last question to you is, the Collins Center is part of state government, so this was a no-bid contract. Instead of doing an RFP, and instead of clearly delineating what we would like done and having open, fair, competitive bidding, we went to the May Institute, and we're going to pay them a total of $52,355. So far, I have a 33-page report, which comes out to $1,586 a page. Now, you can add probably 10 more pages to it, and that would reduce it. But in a roundabout way, why not have open competitive bidding? Why not throw out there, this is what the city of Brockton would like to do with respect to zoning, and then have vendors respond and pick the one that would be most cost-effective and still accomplish what we want? Why do we go the no-bid route?
We chose the Collins Center to do this report because that is what the Collins Center was set up to do, to provide technical assistance and consulting to municipalities throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They've worked with hundreds of communities in the Commonwealth on very similar projects and other state organizations. So it made sense for us to use a well-respected independent body to run this analysis.
But if you went out to bid, you could have had a well-respected independent other vendor, for all you know. Instead, they get
possibly.
Instead, they get to charge whatever they want, and we pay it. There's no open, fair, competitive bidding. They're exempt from 30B. And I'm, folks. Sorry, I hate to be so analytical, but I'm just not impressed. I'm not, and I would have found it much better if this report had said, these are the projects you lost in Brockton. These are the people who wanted to locate a business or a project in Brockton, and they could not do so because of the following restrictions in your zoning. And I would think that would be an easy bit of research to do, because your office would know who came in and who was interested in coming to Brockton and who ultimately decided to go somewhere else, either because we didn't have the available land or we had restrictive zoning. But, Madam Chair, I think I've satisfied myself. I've said it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening. Well, I believe this assessment was worthwhile. I believe that, as stated, our ordinances haven't been amended since essentially 1968. Brockton is a completely different community as it was back then. I think right now what's happening is, as you said, was it Mr. Wilson? That essentially we have a 5-member board rewriting our zoning laws. The use variances that are given out by our zoning board is essentially, I would say the majority of the type of variances that they're passing. I think it's a study like this starts the conversation to put the ball in the court where it belongs, this council, to determine what our zoning laws are, to take some of that weight that we're currently putting on our planning board, that we're currently putting on our zoning board. We're providing them no direction, essentially. And this study helps focus the conversation of how this governmental body that's in charge of our zoning can help guide a conversation of what do we want our city to look like. Because right now our zoning laws are just circles on a map. It's not a dynamic map that kind of takes into account what our city looks like today, what we want it to look like in the future, and how do we, how do we make our neighborhoods a better fit for our residents. Right now, we have our zoning board who's just, and when I sat on the zoning board, it's very myopic. They're looking at the one project in front of them, and they're thinking, well, this is a nice lady, and she wants to move her parent in, and they want to build another floor or another, blow out the back or whatever it may be. There's no discussion of an overall plan of what we want the neighborhoods to look like. Mixed use. I mean, mixed use is essentially, we have these, as you said, economic corridors throughout our city that could benefit from a mixed-use zoning. We don't even have that in Brockton. And so it becomes, who's coming before us? Do we like your shirt? And if we do, then we're going to grant you your variance. And so, again, I believe that your report was comprehensive. I think you talked to a majority of the stakeholders, and this outlines a conversation on how does our city move forward, because the way it's happening right now, and I respect every member of our ZBA, but we're not doing our job as a council providing them guidance on what we want Brockton to look like. And so as long as we fail to do so, our zoning laws are going to be rewritten without our input. And that's essentially what we have now. And so I appreciate your time. I appreciate your effort. I thought this was a worthwhile endeavor. And I hope, Mr. May, that through this conversation and the additional conversations you'll have with this report, with additional stakeholders, that we can begin maybe another working group that can begin the discussion of amending our zoning ordinances to move Brockton into the 21st century. So again, I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. May, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilors, anyone else? Councilor Giagostino.
I'll try and be quick. So I actually, interestingly enough, agree with both of my colleagues from various different points that they've made so far. The reality is we had to start somewhere. This report is that start, obviously, and we've got to just move forward from here. Maybe the process was or wasn't flawed, what have you, but we are where we are. I do want to address two things that just came up, councilor involvement. I mean, that's kind of what people expect us to do, is go to the different boards and commissions and voice their concerns, whether it's zoning or I was just at traffic last week doing the same thing. I mean, that's I don't know if in other communities that's not part of the role of a counselor or a selectman, but it is in this community anyway. It's one of their expectations is that there's an issue in my area, my counselor's going to go, and if I call my counselor, and they're going to go and let the folks on that board know what feedback they've gotten. So I disagree that that's inappropriate.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
I know that we've discussed this a couple of times. They're not, I don't think the Collins Center is saying that that's inappropriate. They are making an observation based on the interviews with local attorneys, local land use attorneys, local builders, local developers, that this is happening.
Okay.
It's not saying if that's good or bad, but the underlying issue is that everybody needs to come before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it doesn't fit into a broader scheme when the Board of Appeals is they're just looking at that one particular property, as Councilor Thompson had alluded to.
Right. Well, and I do agree with that. We all know that our zoning is ancient and needs to be updated, and there's a lot of things in this city that we've all seen them where we drive around and you wonder how the heck that ever happened that way, right? How did that ever get approved? How did that ever get built there? Who's approving this stuff way back when, right? So I support the fact that we need to review our zoning and redo it. I just, like I said, and now it makes more sense that the local zoning attorneys don't like that we show up and stand up for our constituents. Well, to the local zoning attorneys, too bad. So as far as the fire chief, again, and I get that came from that feedback, and I mean, I think he brings a valuable perspective to those conversations and those requests. We have other boards that have, traffic being an example, we have a representative, a captain from the police department that is the chair of that. Again, he brings a perspective that no one else is going to have. So anyway, just my own 2 cents on that. So all that having been said, is this going to work its way into what we really need to do here, which is a review of the city zoning map? I mean, is that where this is going?
I'm hoping that now that this is out in the open, that we can have a very public discussion with City Council, with the property owners, the homeowners, the constituents that are here in Brockton, and really go through parts of the city with a fine-tooth comb. We're doing that in Campello. We're doing that in the downtown Trout Brook area. We'll be doing that in Lovett Brook and in some other areas. But in particular with this study, which really started out at looking at the R1C districts, or R1 districts, and that every property owner I want to joke, and I don't want to joke, but there's very few properties that are conforming. Okay. And so everybody has to come to the Zoning Board of Appeals to get something on their home. I live on a 75-foot wide lot. I'm nowhere near the 175-foot requirement.
Right.
So if I want to rebuild my garage, I need to come to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Every homeowner like that is like that in Brockton, and it would make more sense to look at the zoning map more as a fine brush rather than the paint roller that we did with it, years ago.
Okay, that makes sense. And so that's kind of what this report looks to get us headed in that direction.
I'm hoping, yes, please.
Okay, all right. So, and that, I think most would agree, is something we need to look at, because we're, to your point, nothing, fits what it's supposed to fit. All right. You mentioned that a lot of our, and I feel like I know what the answer is going to be, but I just wanted to ask you to expand on that a little bit. A lot of the variances that go in front of the ZBA are things that shouldn't be going in front of the ZBA. Can you give me an example of, the typical type of request that would go in front of a town or city whose zoning isn't from 1960 something?
I guess let me start with, I didn't approach this project as the zoning lawyer, so that was not how I was tasked to approach the project. Where that statement comes from is that, and I'm a lawyer, under state law, and there's particular Supreme Judicial Court case law that says variances are supposed to be granted very sparingly. And so when we look at the number of cases that are going before the ZBA, the report says, I forget the exact number, but I think it's 85% include a request for a variance, and a substantial portion, about half, are granted. That just would indicate to me sort of circumstantially that if they're supposed to be very rare and about half of them are approved, something's going on, something should be looked at. So that's where that statement comes from. To the second part of your question, I guess I apologize, I'm going to give you a sort of a roundabout answer.
That's all right.
So you can, let me give this background. So when a person comes before the ZBA and they submit a petition, the petition can be for variance, it can be for a petition, or it can be for both. So the numbers don't always align, but in Brockton's case, 85% of petitions include a variance, and only 13%, somewhere around there, include a special permit. Now, a special permit, well, sort of at a base level, we kind of assume that, if you're doing something within the use for your property, you don't have to go to anyone. You can just build that thing if it's sort of within our use. The special permits are the next level that say there are some uses or some dimensional requirements that we, the community, we the city, want to take a closer look at if you're going to be sort of interfering there or sort of stepping into that zone. And the variance is the last result for, I compare it, it's a little bit flamboyant, but if someone stole something, we generally want people not to steal things, but there are certain limited exceptions where somebody will won't be found guilty for stealing something. That's the variance. The variance is the exception to the rule that we stated. So the fact that you've got this huge imbalance between your variances and your special permits means that people are not taking advantage of the things that they could do on their property, but may require extra scrutiny because they don't want to. So that's sort of, and I think the term that's sort of been thrown around is sort of right-size the zoning ordinance, whatever that may mean.
Right.
You may expect to see, you may say, we want this to be a single-family home district, but we might allow a two-family by special permit. Then you would see, maybe not everything is special permit, but you would see more special permits and variances because that's in alignment with what people want to build in that area.
Right.
And that sort of feeds back into the issue with the ZBA. Number one, everybody needs a variance for everything that they're going to do because you can't comply with the zoning ordinance at all. And so everything's, you sort of overboard your ZBA. I hear some of the comments about what we said about the fire commissioner and so on. We met with all of the ZBA members, and they, I think the general, and I thought we put in the report, was that they are very conscientious, they care a lot, and they're hardworking. These are not bad ZBA members. The issue is that this is not the place where you should be going to adjudicate what the new zoning is. This is a place that you go serve as the last resort, but they're getting everything. And so they're overwhelmed, and on top of that, they haven't received sort of like official guidance from anywhere in sort of recent memory, which sort of is a compound sort of problem. I'd only add one other point. I apologize, it's sort of, your question made me think of it and sort of goes off of it. Another interesting thing from the study, which isn't specifically spelled out in the report, is you've got this high number of use variances that are being granted, which again is an indication that they may or may not be sort of legally permissible. But you don't have a high amount of litigation. You don't have a high number of cases going to court. And, the inference to me is people are not against some of these changes. The community is sort of voting with their wallet to say, I don't mind if the commercial structure next to me becomes mixed use or whatever. Because, so your community is kind of sort of inferentially sort of telling you that even through this process.
Okay. So, I mean, and this is something I want to be clear on because I think it's an important point. And first, let me back up. I want to make sure my comment didn't at all come off as a criticism of the people who serve on the ZBA. They're doing a great, they're good people, and, you know, like you said, we don't have a bad ZBA. So, and it sounds like basically the issue isn't that they are overdoing it on the variances, it is that we just have so many non-conforming lots, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, our previous report, our presentation listed the most use variances in the non-residential districts are allowing mixed use or multifamily residential. And then in the residential districts, people are seeking to increase the number of dwelling units within their given structure. So it's that those are the things they're trying to do. These property owners aren't trying to do horrible things. They're
Right.
trying to make the best use of their property.
Right. They need an in-law, or they need or whatever. I want to put a
Exactly.
garage on, or.
Yep.
Right. Okay. All right.
And I'll just say, since the fire chief issue came up more than once, we're all former municipal employees at the Collins Center for the most part. And, you know, like it was said previously, we're just remarking on what was said, but at the same time, you know, the fire chief should definitely be reviewing plans and have a say. It's whether he's required to go to every zoning meeting, right? So so it's not, I think that in most communities where they have a fire chief, that the fire and public safety in all its iterations are hopefully reviewing plans, but it's the idea of whether they have to sit on a board or if they're providing technical expertise. So just to be clear.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. That's all I really had. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to speak for a moment. I think at its best, your study opens the eyes of my colleagues and I, okay, and hopefully other departments of the city, as to what other communities are doing in the area of zoning and how we can improve and make things better. I don't agree with all of your study. That's my prerogative. I think for us, finding the place to begin, you know, your study may satisfy that. I think in addition to thinking about all that you have in your study, we also have to think about keeping up with city growth, because you're laying heavily on residential and expanding residential and mixed use and those things. We have to be concerned about, can we afford that? Can our systems afford that? Be it public safety, be it education. There's a lot to think about. I support the integrity of our Zoning Board of Appeals members, and I don't want those members or any of the public at home to think that there is a lack of integrity, that we judge people by the color of their shirt or the attorney that they decide to hire, who might be more of a regular in front of the board. We do have a number of lawyers who come in regularly, but I'd like to believe, and I know in the 2 years that I served on the Zoning Board of Appeals, each matter was treated individually and differently. And that's another thing. When you're considering a matter, you're looking at the four corners of the ordinance. You're not considering what is the policy of the city. That's not what the Zoning Board of Appeals does. At least that's not what they did when I were on it. And so, and the other thing is, we talked about the failure to appeal, and there aren't a lot of appeals. I think that's a cost issue, at least in my experience in my ward. So many people disagree occasionally with what the zoning board decides, but it's a matter of, do I have the 10 grand or the 15 grand to hire an attorney where I may lose? I think in a city such as ours, a gateway city, that's a really important consideration that perhaps you don't take into account. So I'm very pleased you came tonight. I'm sorry to keep you so late. There's great value in much of what you did, and I thank you. Unless someone has something else to say. Oh, Councilor Lally, did you want to speak?
Or Rodriguez, I believe.
Oh, forgive me, Councilor Rodriguez next. I got carried away.
I think he asked first.
Okay, Councilor Lally, thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to rehash what has already been said here from Councilor Farwell to Councilor Thompson, but I want to look at this thing basically because, you know, if I want a study that basically tells me that my hair is down to the back of my back in the sense, I'll find the individuals to basically go along with my study. But that being said, we have a city of 100,000 plus people. I'm not exactly sure what the number were in terms of individuals from the community that you folks actually spoke to. Because there's a tendency in this city of a selected few individuals making a decision on behalf of the entire city. This city is probably one of the more diverse cities in the Commonwealth in terms of diversity, in terms of language, in terms of colors, skin tones, you name it. We are one of the more diverse communities in this community. And often we don't address that diversity when it comes to speaking to our residents. You know, you said here that there were 2 counselors that were a part of this study group. I'm not exactly sure how many people you use, but yet at the same time, we're being presented with a document that will probably be, because you've done your piece, chances are it'll get published one way or the other, and individuals are seeing this at other places in the sense, speaking on behalf of the rest of us in the city that actually had absolutely no voice in the matter. You know, so my whole thing is, yes, this was the initial steps to go forward in terms of changing this, but I think a lot more needs to be done and be a little more inclusive of the folks that call Brockton home, because it's not being included. It happens on a regular basis. We come down the pipeline, and here's the decisions that a study group said that we should do, and the members of that study group does not represent the city. It needs to be representative of the city. It happens here on a regular basis. We see one report after another of somebody coming in, hey, we did this study that says this, and yet I don't know a single person that actually was, other than the colleagues up here, that were involved in this study in terms of participating in giving their input as to what happened. As far as the members of the zoning board, it's that old saying that we say, don't hate the player, hate the game. Because if they're presented with appeals, you know, people are appealing some sort of a ruling and they have to act on the appeal that were brought in front of them. So if the permitting process is what I think needs to be looked at, along with our laws as well, but it's not the zoning responsibility. We're saying almost like, well, they're always denying this, denying this, denying that. I'm not saying that you're saying it. I'm saying that's what we hear. But the point is that it shouldn't even be up to the zoning board in a lot of the decisions to be made in terms of the permitting process in the city. But once we put it on their laps, they're going to look at it and say, well, does this conform to this? Does this conform to that? Because that's what their job is as far as a member of that group. But again, it's a good kickoff. But it's just a kickoff based on what I see, based on what you guys have done. And I don't want this document to be the final document because it doesn't paint a real pretty picture of the city. We all know our laws need to be changed. Our ordinances need to be changed. But it doesn't paint a pretty picture. We had an individual here not too long ago that made the same type of, came in front of us with the presentation of a study that basically painted the city in a real dark picture, you know? So we want to make sure that, you know, we get the best bang for our buck in a sense. We want a study that we can be able to say, look, this is the areas that we can improve and these are the areas that we're doing pretty well with, you know? But I think it needs to be a little more inclusive. We need to get, I don't know exactly, did you guys remember? Because I don't know if I heard it, I asked my colleague here to my left, as far as the number of people that you use in this study, because I know you had 2 counselors, but how many other people did you use?
So we interviewed 14 people. That ran the range of developers, board members, or, you know, various city officials. But I think, you know, a large, I can't remember if everybody has seen the draft study, but the study is qualitative and quantitative. So the larger chunk of the study is this quantitative analysis of both the zoning ordinance and the ZBA's case data. So we did do interviews, because, you know, I'm not from Brockton. I don't have a familiarity with this community. So we did do interviews with people that based on our conversations with Mr. May, have been involved in the zoning, in the ZBA, primarily the ZBA and the zoning process at sort of a ground level. Kind of what are those individuals experiencing on a day-to-day basis as they deal with this zoning ordinance in Brockton? But again, a lot of the recommendations come from that qualitative analysis of the case data and the comparisons. Again, the comparisons with other communities are law to law, not sort of by population.
Yeah, but what about actual customers of the, not necessarily the developers, not the developers. I'm talking about customers, individuals that come before this, the zoning board, that just all they want to do is extend their garage or do whatever they need to do. Just average person on both sides of it, folks that were approved, maybe get a sense of what they liked about the process, what they hated about the process. In those that were actually denied, have a voice as to why they were denied, just to get a little more of a sample versus, selecting, 14 city officials and developers and calling it a study.
So that's a really good question, and it was something that, as you saw in one of the first slides, we took a variety of methods. So the interviews was only one piece. So I hear you about what the representativeness. The idea of going to the builders and the developers and the lawyers were, these are the folks who represent the average person, because trying to find them would have meant the team spent a lot more time. But this is right now a draft, and you all represent your constituents, so we're hoping that
We were not part of it.
Oh, but this, well, I guess maybe we didn't go over the last slide, but this is your time. We sent with the draft report, the content or the comment resolution matrix. So this is your time to say, either on behalf of yourself or your constituents, to give us comments on the draft. So we're asking for those comments to be returned to myself. I have my email address on the slides, and by next Monday, May 8th. So this is your opportunity if you feel as though folks weren't heard. But that we were trying to approximate what you're saying by talking to the people who represent the people you're talking about. But I understand that's not a perfect process. At the same time, we had to spend so much time on the mapping analysis that we couldn't really, do 100 interviews or whatever.
Ma'am, all I'm saying is we've got a city of 100,000 people, and you're putting all your eggs in that one 14 individual basket, and you're saying that this is what the city is saying based on those 14 individuals. And I'm just saying that it does not make much sense in terms of speaking with 14 people to speak on behalf of 100,000 plus people.
I hear you. So I'm sorry, and I'll have to, I look forward to your comments, but I'll have to review. If we were giving the impression that talking to any 14 people is representative or a representative sample, that wasn't my intent. It was, one type of our method was the interviews for the people who interact with the ZBA. And as my colleague was talking about, the other methods were a lot more quantitative. But no, we're not by any means trying to represent the qualitative pieces, saying it's representative of everybody.
Yeah, but that's what it sounds like. We studied the community, we got the responses from the individuals that we spoke to, and this is what they said. And that's what I'm saying, that it's got to be a little more representative of the entire city and not necessarily those 14 people that might have an axe to grind one way or the other, for or against. So that's why I'm saying that it needs to be a little more inclusive in the sense, and at least, I'm not saying that you should speak with every single counselor that sits up here, but there's 11 of us, and I would say you need to speak with at least 6 of us, 6, 7 of us, to get a sense of what goes on in this community when it comes to that stuff, because it makes sense. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for sticking with us. We've gone all over. We've taken a little wander this evening. But if I'm to understand this correctly, This is not a verdict. This is not a finding. What you have done is, in order to start the conversation, you've gone out to get facts beforehand to give us some data to talk about as we enter the conversation, which has yet to officially start. This is the beginning of the conversation. So all that has led up to this is not the culmination. This is not it. This is just the beginning. And so you wanted to talk to people who had an idea, you know, some often or frequent contact with the zoning board to get that kind of input, so we have that to review as well. This is not, you know, these aren't your findings or your opinions or your suggestions. You are reporting what you've discovered in your, you know, investigation, we'll call it, in your research. The zoning board, or the ordinances that we're working with being put together in 1968, I'll occasionally make jokes about my age, but I think it's fair to say that nobody on this council had a hand in putting them together. We do have quite a lot of problems with, you know, the way it's been sort of set on autopilot. We've dumped a lot of extra work on the zoning board. The majority of my ward is their houses made by developer Campanelli, and none of them fit what we would require right now for the construction of a new house. And I grew up in those neighborhoods, and they were very, you know, they were nice, they were ideal. So I don't think anyone can really argue that taking a look at it, just a wellness check, is, you know, a reasonable idea after this long. And I appreciate the work you've done, and you know, if you did go beyond your scope, I know not to look a gift consultant in the mouth, so I appreciate it. But the report, I think to this point, I appreciate it. I understand this is not a ruling or an opinion. This is just the information you found that you are sharing with us, so that when we do sit down with you to have these conversations, we will both be well equipped and prepared to have these conversations, both the council and the folks at home, for when we do turn to the people abroad, you know, at large, to you know, get their input, because, you know, they're the ones we've been charged to represent. So, you know, yeah. And I think, you know, there's a lot of things that we can take a look at. I know that some of my colleagues did mention our role as counselors in front of the boards is something that we place a high degree of significance on, and it is something that the folks at home do rely on us for as well. You know, myself personally, oftentimes the developer will approach me beforehand, and I will say, look, you know, they look for our support, and we say, you know, it's not our support to give. We have to represent the people who are here now, and you know, you have to talk to them. So I'll often have a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors and bring the developer in to talk about the plan. And however the chips fall, I have to represent the people I've been charged with representing. You know, so that's, you know, something that we put a high degree of priority on. And I know, forgive me, Councilor D'Agostino, if I'm stepping into your territory there, but one of the things that we've been working on, a couple of councilors, a working group assembled by Councilor D'Agostino, are some, you know, some modifications to some of our existing zoning ordinances, things that I'm sure we would not, you know, we would not lose out on by getting your, you know, getting your eyes on it. You know, not necessarily to change it. They've already been filed, but still to get, you know, thoughts, opinions, and considerations. But I just wanted to, you know, make sure that I had everything right, and that I knew exactly where we were, because we went all over a little, but we are not reviewing the end product. We are reviewing the data collected in order to have a constructive conversation.
Yes.
I understand. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselors?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. All in favor? All opposed? It carries. Thank you very much. Thank you. Counselors, this meeting is adjourned.
Oh.
Okay. I'll have Counselor Mendez go first.
Oh, okay.
So the Massachusetts House of Representatives is doing listening tours across the state. And then on Monday, May 8th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at West Middle School, we're going to be meeting to discuss gun safety. And the purpose of this meeting is to really bring together community leaders, people that are dealing with issues on every day, and to be discussing about gun violence in our city. So I invite the public to come. Bring your questions. We'll have a moment that you'll be able to ask your questions and get to hear more. And from there, we're going to be looking at our current laws and see how that is currently impacting our communities. So it's a very important meeting, and I wish that you're able to come. So it's Monday, May 8th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at West Middle School, and I hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Azak.
Thank you. So a couple of announcements. I'll be really quick. The Montello Business Association, especially Mr. Greg Belcher from Waite Funeral Home, have been working hard to restore and maintain Snow Clock in the Snow Clock area, which is located at North Main Street and East Main Street. Saturday, April 22nd, which was Earth Day, Mr. Belcher and members of the Montello Business Association, in collaboration with the Brockton Garden Club, did a cleanup at Snow Clock, and you would be amazed at how much trash came out from such a small area. So I would just like to publicly thank them for all they do in the community, for both the Montello Business Association as well as the Brockton Garden Club. On another note, please save the date, I guess. Brockton High School, our award-winning drama club, is presenting this year's spring musical, which is Mamma Mia, which is exciting, and that's taking place May 12th through the 14th. Please visit the Brockton Public Schools website to get more information or contact them directly. So, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to remind everybody that this Saturday, May 6th, is the Keep Brockton Beautiful Day. That's going to be held at Heights Crossing at 35 Christie Place. Registration begins at 7:30 a.m. We will have coffee and donuts. Cleanup begins at 9 a.m. We do have a list of different areas throughout the city that need some attention, and so we can find out different areas on that day which to clean up, or if you want to just clean up your own area, your own yard, or the areas in your neighborhood, free to do so. At 12 o'clock, there will be a cookout to be held at Heights Crossing, and so there will be burgers, dogs, raffles, and other prizes given out that day. So I hope many of you can come and join us and take an effort to clean up our city. We appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we're adjourned.